everyone? It's Ryan from Rocky Mountain Cigar Show back for another live Thursday episode. This show just keeps getting more and more fun, and we have an incredible guest on for first interview after PCA. And as always, Robert is as uncensored on this show as he is in real life. So that's going to be a fun interview here. But before we jump into that, just want to give a quick little shout out to all the sponsors that make this show possible. We have Drew Estate Cigars. We have ROCF Cigars. Big shout out to BAMF Cigars, as well as K by Karen Berger Cigars. And then we also have New Air humidors. If you're looking for a humidor and you live in my section of the world, the dry area, desktop humidors can be a little bit of a pain in the ass. So definitely jump over to newair.com and grab yourself one of their amazing humidors. In the description of this video, you will see a promo code for 15% off any of the humidors that you want. I specifically use the 1500. It's fully self-contained, heat and cooled, and self-humidified. Makes it very easy to use. And my cigars, they never move temperature or humidification. It's fantastic. And then we also have Christoph Cigars. Thank you so much for sponsoring this show and being part of it. And last but certainly not least, I am going to be drinking the drink of the Rocky Mountain Cigar Show, produced by Axe and Oak Distillery out of Colorado Springs, Colorado. This is a whiskey that I have been drinking for about 5 years now, since my wife and I moved out here and first tasted it. Definitely go down to your local store if they have it. Figure out a way to order yourself a bottle. Tonight, I'm going to be drinking the Hillshine aged and finished in Scotch barrels. This is absolutely fantastic for those of you that don't like Scotch. It's not a heavy peat. Definitely worth the trying for those of you that do prefer Scotch over bourbon. It gives you enough of that Scotchiness that you don't miss anything. So definitely check out everything over there. And I forgot to say, jump onto bamfcigars.com or ROCFcigars.com and use my promo code RMCS15 for 15% off the entire website. So I've given you promo codes for cigars and a humidor. Go buy the humidor and fill it with the cigars. Thank you so much again, everybody, for joining me on this week's episode. Hope everyone's having a great night. I will be smoking the Savages, which is one of my favorite cigars from 101, as well as the Last Czar. But enough talking from me. Nobody came here to listen to me ramble. Let's go ahead and bring in the man of the hour, Robert Caldwell. How you doing, Robert? You're not coming through, bud. He was coming through in the back studio, but he's not right now. Let him just make some adjustments and he'll get it. Let's see. Nope, this is not happening again. Nope, still can't hear you, Robert. Can you guys hear Robert? Is that just me, or this is ridiculous? There we go. Perfect.
How about now?
Now we've got him.
Okay.
Perfect. There you go.
Perfect.
Just a setting problem. Nobody freak out. It's not the software like the last couple times. It is what it is. All right, great. So, Robert, I'll give you the start of the show here to kind of just introduce yourself for those people that don't know who you are at this point in time, and then we'll kind of jump into things.
Perfect. So I'm Robert Caldwell. I'm a cigar manufacturer. I own Caldwell Cigar Company and Lost and Found Cigars. And then we distribute as well La Barba. So La Barba's a company owned by a guy named Tony Bellato, and we've been distributing his brand for about, the whole time, I guess. Almost 8 years, something like that.
Nice. Now, I want to kind of just jump in a little bit back at the at the beginning of kind of where you started, because you and I talked a little bit pre-show. That what's so fascinating about reading about your history is the fact that it was kind of an accident, right? Mm-hmm. In the standpoint of it wasn't anything you set out to do. but then it just kind of happened. So go ahead and kind of tell everybody the little bit of the intro story, and then we'll go from there.
Sure. So I was, I mean, I started smoking cigars when I was 12 years old. So I've always been an avid consumer. I mean, even when I was like 12, 13, 14, I'd smoke 3, 4 cigars on the weekend. And then when I was, I don't know, 22 or something, I ended up opening a restaurant and hotel cigar distribution company effectively for a friend of mine that was working at a retail store because he was dissatisfied with his job. So I said, listen, I'll put up the money, I'll set it up, and then you run it. And then he didn't end up running it. So I ended up running it nights and weekends. And then we started making blends for hotels. And then we started working with like chefs and sommeliers and stuff to develop like proprietary stuff. So we had, you know, like, I don't know, special shit that we would source and do for hotels. And then that rolled into me becoming friends with Christian Aroa, formerly of Camacho, currently CLE and Asylum. And then we ended up converting a warehouse I had in Miami to a cigar factory, and I did a brand called Winwood Cigar Factory there. We were horrible business partners. We were friends prior, and then, like, I mean, just sometimes you just don't work well with another person that you think you would. So that didn't work out. And then from there, I went to start Caldwell Cigar Company. So the entire existence of my cigar career is completely on accident. And even worse than that, like even when I started Caldwell, I'm like, oh, I'll never be the face of the company. So here you go.
Well,
Oops.
you're definitely nobody misses you in a crowd, as you're like one of the tallest Americans I think in the country right now, and especially in comparison to the cigar world. When I was watching you doing interviews with the PCA, like everybody just kind of came up to your chest.
Yeah. But actually,
So
there's two guys in the cigar industry taller than me. One is
Omar,
Tony Gomez, Lito's son. Yeah, he's like a half inch taller than me. And then Omar's like a fucking foot taller than me.
yeah, Omar from Fratello Cigars.
Yeah, he's a giant.
Yes, we have Kevin from Cigar Prop joining us tonight. Yes, Kevin,
Nice.
I am switching over to StreamYard. I know I should have listened to you at the beginning. Um, so, and some people don't know people, man. You always got to give people the ability to introduce themselves. So, well, Robert, let's go ahead and just kind of jump right into the hoopla that surrounded you at a little bit of last year's PCA and then kind of going into this year's PCA. Are you willing to talk about why the booth was destroyed last
Well,
year?
no, because nobody's quite figured it out on their own. So I can't give up the goodies. But
It's
we
just
did
you and I,
leave.
dude.
We did leave a day early last year. We went to get burritos, so that was fun. And then this year, we actually were very fucking well behaved this year. Everybody came by, you know, expecting to see a trash booth, and we were like very orderly and shit. And then I did post at the end of the PCA. I went to the lounge at the airport to board what's the manufacturer's flight back to Miami. So it's the last day, the first flight out. Everybody's on that flight. I get to the airport lounge. There's no manufacturers in there at all. Nobody. And I'm not going to tell you who was on my flight, but if the plane died, the industry's over effectively. Everybody who's anybody that's in the manufacturing industry was on that flight back to Miami, the first flight. And inside the lounge, there was a ton of like PCA board members or prior board members, past board members. And I thought that was very ridiculous because we are not allowed to leave early. And then that's why none of the manufacturers were in the lounge. I guess because the PCA guys were in the lounge. So it's total bullshit. The last day of the show is a fucking joke, and we have to pay for it. I mean, it costs us more money, not hotels, food, but also like we're charged for that extra day. So it adds a 25% premium, I guess, to the show for us, which is bullshit. And then we're not allowed to break out or down early, and we're not supposed to leave. And then historically, manufacturers would leave like a skeleton crew of 2 or 3 guys, and then they'd all leave.
Yeah, it makes
And that's
sense.
also against the rules. So it's a complete double standard. It's total bullshit. And then one of the guys that was there, I knew I don't know exactly where everybody was flying, but one of them I know where he was flying. Because I mean, okay, I know who these guys are, but I don't know how the fuck they get home, right? But a couple of them there were directs. And I looked at the board, and one of them there were 4 direct flights to his city, and he was on the earliest one out. but yeah, we have to stay. So I thought that was total bullshit. So I posted about that, and then we didn't really get any blowback because we didn't last year either from those people. But I did have a board member cancel his order that he'd never placed, which is fucking awesome. So he's like, cancel my order, cancel all my back orders with Caldwell. I'm like, you don't even do business with us, which is fucking amazing. So that was good. And then I did have another guy who I guess was somewhat upset. And then his response was, well, Caldwell's right, but he shouldn't have publicized that. And I'm like, well, if I'm right, and I did publicize it, fuck it. And then on top of that, last year, you remember these guys did this, like, if you're not here, you're nobody social media post, you know, bashing all the manufacturers that chose not to come last year. And I think last year was a different year too, because this year, okay, fine, whatever. But last year, you still effectively were in somewhat concerning, like, health crisis maybe for some guys that were older or paranoid or just didn't want to fucking go because the virus was still circulating pretty heavily. So I think there was a lot of reason for people not to be there last year outside of politics or not wanting to attend the show. And they still chose to put out this message on social media about that. So that's also a double standard. So,
well,
fuck 'em.
And guys, meet Robert Caldwell. So when one of your interviews, you had mentioned that you actually preferred TPE to PCA.
100%.
Can you just explain why you would make that statement, considering TPE is a newer show?
Yeah, well, so TP, first of all, it takes part in the wintertime, not in the summertime. It's also in Las Vegas. It's a largely non-premium cigar show, although since I've been going, which is 3 years, I think they've had a premium cigar segment like 4 or 5. But since I've been attending, I've seen the premium section just multiply and multiply and multiply. So I don't even know how big it is now, but now it's a pretty large section. They also have like glass and vape and all the other bullshit you'd expect to see at a store that sells, you know, I'd say the majority of the customers are convenience stores and head shops and shit like that. But there's a premium cigar segment, and more retailers have started coming out to that show to see us in the wintertime. And we also do run deals for that show as well. But the way that they did that show the first year to us is they said, listen, premium cigar manufacturer, we want you to come to the show. We're going to pay all your expenses, and you don't have to pay for a booth. Just come. What? And then they did the same for retailers. They paid their hotel rooms for retailers to come out. And I believe they still do that. I think you can still come out as a premium cigar retailer and get your hotel room covered by the association and have free entry. But the thing that's great with them is they come by and they're like, how's it going? You know, what can we do to help? And all this bullshit. They're like really friendly people. And they're owned by a large organization that's also involved in the cigar world, which does business with a lot of people that are at the show, but they make a point of trying to help in other ways. So if your brand doesn't fit within their distribution channel, because they don't retail at all, but there's a company associated that does do distribution. Mind you, it's doing distribution to head shops and gas stations and liquor stores. So not every, like, our brand doesn't fucking work. But then they do everything they can to help anyways. It's like, hey, let's come by and do a post. Let's get you interviewed for a partner magazine that we own. Let's, you know, do like some type of online promotion. So they really do want to help the brands that attend the show. And I feel like it's a show that's growing, that's listening to the industry. And instead of, you know, PCA, which I almost fucking refuse to call it that anymore. It's like fucking Kanye West changed the name every goddamn week. It's the third fucking name it's been. First was RTDA, right? Tobacco dealers. And then, no, we're not tobacco. We're pipe and fucking cigars. So then it's IPCPR for pipe and cigar. And then they fucked the pipe guys. So now there's no pipe guy. Like they just completely hammered the pipe segment. So now it's only cigars, right? But if you went 7 or 8 years ago, you had vape and you had cigarettes and you had all this shit there. So they've kind of like turned into a premium cigar show, which is now what the show's called, Premium Cigar Association, whatever. But they tell us what to do. And that's a retailer-driven show. And they're like, oh, we just put this fucking manufacturer, you know, on the board. Who cares? It's too little, too late. And a lot of the guys that you're seeing involved with them, it's like they're, you know, fuck it. But TPE, the difference is TPA. It's like, Robert, what do you think of this year's show? What can we do next year to make it better for the manufacturers? Yeah. So you're dealing with retailers, but the show gives a fuck about you as a manufacturer, which is
which makes
weird.
you feel good.
Yeah, like at PCA, I've never had anybody been like, "How's the show?" Or or they'll come by and it's like, historically they come by and they're like, "No, your brand's really cool and we want to make some changes and we're gonna, we want to talk to you about." No, you don't. So if you go to the Apple store and you come in the store, right? You walk in, you're gonna be a fucking hour at the Apple store, but it feels like you're there for 10 minutes because you walk in and they're like, "Oh, Bill, look at this fucking new MacBook over here. Check that out. Javier is going to help you." And then like 5 minutes later, Javier comes over and he's like, "Hey, I'm sorry, we're kind of busy today. Have a look at this new iPhone. Look at these features." So they keep resetting the timetable by continuing to touch you. And PCA does the same thing. They come by every year and it's like all these fucking changes they're going to do and they've never done jack shit. So it's the same thing. It's like every year, until we're not idiots. So after the first 3 years of them doing this bullshit, we said they're completely fucking full of shit. They're liars and they're not going to do shit, which they never have. But they continue to kind of like start the clock with you to get you to think something's going to change. And here we are 9 years later, nothing's changed. And then in other regards, you have all these board members, right? If you were a PCA board member, what brands would you support? The brands that went to your fucking show, right?
It's kind of like Cigar Aficionado in that sense, right?
Well, how come it is that these guys don't support a lot of the brands that attend the show? And 80% of their business, I would estimate, I'm not sure, but I would estimate 80% of their business comes from the brands that don't attend the show. So who doesn't attend? General, Altadist, AJ, Davidoff. I'm missing people. Drew Estate. Do you have you're telling me these businesses don't do 60 to fucking 80% of the business with the brands that don't attend? But then those same retailers won't support the brands. They're going and they're asking brands for money, for sponsorship. Oh, let's fight this fight that we all have against the government. Oh, come out to our show, spend $2,500 on a 10 by 10 plus, plus, plus. We used to have 24 of those. We used to spend 95 grand to go to the show. So
Jesus.
Come out and do all this bullshit. Hey, and then it's like, but then they can't even give you a fucking order. Because a lot of these guys don't support small brands, period. Like almost by policy. And they're only doing business with the brands that are not present at the show. So that's why they're in the lounge at fucking 8 a.m. on the last day. They can't get out soon enough because they don't give a fuck. Because everything they bought in the first 6 hours of the first day. And the real business they did before the show with the brands that didn't attend.
So let me ask you this then. First off, do you do anything with the BCA?
BCA?
The Boutique Cigar Association.
No, I don't. I don't know if we qualify for that. I think we're too big.
Okay. Because they just signed. Weird, but it is because you're definitely what I would consider boutique in both the Lost and Found line and your line. And I was just going to ask you if you were a part of it. I was going to ask what you thought about their partnership that they just recently signed.
Well, I'm unfamiliar. I by the way, I read no cigar media. Okay. I have fucking no idea what's going on in the industry. I live in a vacuum.
I guess the BCA signed a partnership with PCA to give the Boutique Cigar Association members a section of next year's PCA floor layout.
That's idiotic.
They can have.
To me, that's a desperate money grab from PCA to try to be relevant somehow. And then for BCA, probably they're getting some money out of that. I would assume. Maybe it makes sense to BCA. PCA to me, it's a cheap, too little, too late. It's like you break up with a girl and you leave her because she's cheated on you and she's a whore, and then she comes back and she's like, "Well, I brought my friend to the party tonight. How about now?" It's like, maybe we'll do that once, but probably not going back to that.
I don't disagree with you. I don't disagree with you at all on the PCA side of the agreement. I do think for BCA, it's a better end of the deal for them because now they're at least going to be potentially included some of the smaller brands. But
if they can monopolize on it for a year or two to give them a little strength to go back out on their own, fine. Because maybe it'll give them some relevance and some lift, but I would disassociate myself. I mean, to me, again, PCA is just grabbing at straws at this point. And again, so you have BCA there. Grab fucking all the top players in PCA, send them to the BCA section, see how much they buy. They're not going to buy shit.
And see, that's where you have that's where I think you're 100% right with the PCA side of the money grab. But hopefully it will
By the way, you
benefit
saw
the
that they ran a
PCA.
fucking GoFundMe last year trying to raise money to save PCA or some bullshit, right?
I
Like
did
last
hear.
time I
I
checked,
did hear.
GoFundMe's like your
Did you
fucking
give to
father
that?
dies and you can't afford a grave. You run a GoFundMe. No, I didn't. I actually blew them up on a no, but I mean that's like GoFundMe. Every time I see it, it's like hey, my brother got in a car accident, his leg got amputated, he needs
Oh
a
yeah.
fake leg.
Oh
Like I
yeah.
need whatever. It's valid causes. So they were doing this shit during the pandemic, and I had noticed it right before I jumped on another uh, show, and I brought it up on the show, and some references to it were made, and then I think they pulled it down. But I mean, get the fuck out of here.
So you're being censored by the PCA.
No. They censored themselves. They removed their GoFundMe page.
Oh.
But I mean, get the fuck out of here, GoFundMe page. Like, here's an idea of PCA. Why don't you go to all the brands you don't support? Why don't you say, hey, listen, we're going to support you. We need 15% discount. But rather than the discount, we want you to give that money to PCA. There's a deal. And all the small cigar manufacturers will take that deal. And you'll raise money and you'll
Absolutely.
support them at the same time and not be liars. That's not the right
Absolutely.
word. Two-sided bitches. So I'm making
And this
t-shirts.
is
I'll send you
why
one.
I would wear that in a heartbeat. So this is why, guys, I was so excited to have Robert on for the last month and a half, 2 months. We got this going because I was really hoping this was going to be the first PCA after interview he did, and it is. And we get Robert in full color tonight, so that's great. So Robert, actually, since we're on the side of issues with PCA, I have here somebody's asking if you would be willing to discuss your side of all the Pravada drama that's circling right now.
Um, I wasn't aware actually that there was drama circulating either. We did release a cigar that was called the fuck was it called? 15 Minutes of Fame, which had been a cigar allegedly that we did with those guys, but we released it at a much lower price than it had been released originally. And it caused some concerns, but that was the price the cigar should have been all along. So we retailed it at $8. It was a Lancero. Um, yeah, I don't know. And then we trolled them a little bit because it's fun to do. I mean, if you got to delete messages at 2 in the morning or like posting videos and you just, I mean, I don't know. It was a bit amusing for me, but now I do have that product coming out in a box with a band on it at $8 again, so that'll be fun.
And
But yeah,
that's a
we stopped doing business with Pravada a couple of years ago. So we were with him in the very beginning. So it was Room 101. Actually, he was brought
yep,
to my attention by Matt Booth,
yep,
and we supported him from very early on. And then, you know, we have the luxury of not having to do business with anyone.
correct.
So we withdrew from his existence, I guess, effectively like 16, 18 months ago. We probably shipped him the last shipment, something like that. We just don't do business with him.
Now I will say because we're talking about Brian, so
Yeah.
like I will say my issue with Brian is what he has said about Abe DeBam, as far as just the vitriol he showed on Cooper's thing, but we won't get into that. Anyways, so what did you show at PCA that we can kind of glance over real fast, and when will stuff from PCA be shipping out?
So we had an extension. We had a new concept that we launched that's called Caldwell Crafted and Curated. So when I go down, like I mean, you go down the factory. What do you do? Like you fuck around and you play with blends and shit, right? But we have so many blends, and then we add something here or there. You have a limited here or there, but sometimes you just keep making shit. And so over the years, I've consistently had cigars that I've made that I've liked. Sometimes they're iterations of blends I have already. Sometimes they're new blends entirely. And historically, I would take these cigars, have some in my humidor. I go out to an event, I bring a couple bundles and hand them out to guys, kind of like as a pocket cigar, or fun, or like we did one with Coop that had been or Coop, fuck me, Dojo, which had been a cigar that was effectively, I mean, I get was that. I'm like, here, try this cigar. He's like, what the fuck is this? I'm like, a blend I made. So you have an arsenal of shit. So then we said, okay, let's take our top 12 or so that we've ever done and commercialize them as very small releases. So we did, one of them's a Last Czar iteration called Louis the Last, 42 by 5 1/4, 10 count box, $12 retail. That has, it's the same wrapper and binder. It's the same cigar, but the wrapper and binder are higher primings and it has a different fermentation and it's rolled at a different factory. It's a different experience to the cigar. And then we have one called Athene, which is an Eastern Standard iteration. So it's got a Habano wrapper on it. That's the only change is the wrapper's Habano, but a very light Habano, very low priming. So it's exactly the same experience as Eastern Standard, just different flavor. So that's really cool. So those are 25 count boxes. I think the retail 16. I can't remember. We have one called Montrose, which is Long Live the King. Wrapper is Habano instead of Corojo, and then one of the filler leaves instead of being Corojo is what's called Piloto. Excuse me, it's a Dominican Aromatico. So it's a very aromatic Dominican leaf. That's a really cool cigar. It doesn't smoke anything like Long Live the King.
Okay.
It's made from that blend. So it comes with a Long Live the King band and then a second band on it. But it's a fucking gorgeous cigar. It smokes more like an Eastern Standard to me, you know, like that type of profile than a Long Live the King. And then we had a Culebra that was called Antoinette. We did 202 boxes. So they're all really small. And that's a program that's going to keep going every month or 2 months. We'll have a new release or an iteration or something for like a year. So that was showcased there. And that was actually it. I mean, Lost and Found, we're switching to boxes and bands on everything. So we had some of our stuff that's coming, you know, in the next 90 days that was put on the table to show. But the only new thing, I guess, per se, was the Caldwell Crafted Curated program, which is fucking awesome.
So I actually misspoke in the green room. It was the Eastern Standard Lancero that I had, the limited edition release that you did.
The Sun-Grown?
Correct, yes.
Yeah, those are fucking good.
That was, but again, anybody that watches the show knows that I am a Lancero whore. I am one of the few guys that ask for them and actually buy them by the box. I just think they're, in my opinion, it's my favorite size. So,
have you smoked the Anastasia Lancero yet?
I have not.
They're incredibly expensive, like abusively expensive. They're $30 retail. Fucking expensive, but they're so good. It's not something you'd buy a box of. The box is $7.50, but it's something you buy like a cigar too. They're very special.
No, I would love to try that. I will definitely keep my eyes out for that for sure. I think I've had as much of your line as I've been able to find, and including as much as the Lost and Founds as I've been able to find. So actually, Kevin made a funny statement here, and since Kevin is good friends of both of ours, Kevin says here before he got back from PCA, he had several text messages and emails from the PCA begging for donations.
I believe it. There's better places to give money to. I mean, there's actually people and organizations that need it.
For sure.
That matter.
Absolutely. No, I don't think PCA needs the money. So Kevin also asked another question here that he wanted to hear a little bit about Just the Tip, because that's what he's smoking right now.
So Just the Tip is, so we had 15 Minutes of Fame, which is a Lancero. And then Just the Tip is the Rothschild-ish version. It's a 52 by 4 3/4 of the same cigar. We will not name what it was prior. But the Lancero was probably the most sought after cigar that came out, whatever year that was. And then Just the Tip is the Rothschild-ish iteration of that cigar.
Perfect. And since we're on show questions here, so this is from the this is a question from Dan from the dojo video that you did the banana with. He said you should come up with a side project with you and Omar and put the banana on the band and call it the Rocket Scientist.
There
Since
you go.
Had asked the banana question. So you know what I'm really curious about is, I've been in sales 20 plus years. So I'm always really curious to how you structured in the very beginning, how you sold your cigars, how you picked the lounges you sold them to, and then kind of what's changed over the years and how you do it now.
Um, we started on the West Coast by design. Well, so we did think like most cigar brands launch on the East Coast and then move their way west. But if you look at most like movements, if it comes to fashion or design or concept, they're most relevant when they start on the West Coast and move east. So we
Mm-hmm.
started in California selling, and it very difficult. We didn't have anything to sell, so we had cigars with no labels. We had like a roll of like a sheet of printed label sample, and then we had a sample box lid that had been screen printed, and we had to unroll a paper, and we're like, this is how the rings look. Here's the cigar, smoke it, and then here's what the box looks like. So it's kind of funny because we sold a lot. We sold, I don't know how many, like we sold a fuckload of cigars that way. But when we shipped them, everybody's like, oh, these cigars taste so differently. And you're like, yeah, because they got a ring on them now and they come out of a box. So it was very funny to me because it was exactly that, like take the ring off, taste different thing.
Perception.
Yeah. And everybody's like, man, they taste so much better now. And I'm like, yeah, okay. But we started on the West Coast and we just like guerrillaed it. I mean, we went, my first year, I traveled 330 days. I visit stores, 5-6 stores a day, do an event or a cut and light every night, effectively for a year that way. And I slept in my bed 35 nights. So a lot of those days I flew in, slept in the bed, flew out the next morning as well. So it was really, really heavy duty traveling. But we didn't really have, we had standards by which you had to be an account. So you had to like buy, 15 boxes or some bullshit to open the account, which we still have that as a metric to open up. The one thing that's changed is travel. Like I don't do road shows at all anymore. I don't try, like I travel for leisure or I travel. And if I'm traveling, then maybe I'll stop in a store. And then it used to be like, oh, you want to do an event? I fly anywhere for an event. Now I pretty much won't do an event with you. I don't care how much money you want to give me. I'm still not coming to your store unless you have skiing close by, really fucking cool nature, or happen to be in New York City.
So
And
when
I'm
do you
not going
come
to get
into
mugged.
Colorado?
When I go skiing this winter. When I go skiing this winter.
Well, you better reach out to me and let me know. Are you going to be at Cigar Fest?
No.
You're not going. Okay.
No, Zach will be there. No, and actually, last time I went to Colorado, it was like I did like a 10-day ski trip and fucking did an event. I just did a ski trip out to Bend, Oregon, and the accounts love this shit because it's like John, our retailer out there in Bend, which is amazing skiing. I'm like, yeah, I'm coming out to Oregon. I'm going to ski. I'm bringing my wife. Let's go to dinner at XYZ restaurant. By the way, do you want to do an event? He's like, yeah, sure. What's my event order? I'm like, $0. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I'm like, I'll just come hang out in the store. So, that's really, and I like doing that better. I don't like selling like in a big event order and doing all this bullshit. I'd rather just come hang out. But you can't, I mean, you couldn't pay me to do an event a lot of places just because it's a fucking nightmare. So retailers don't like that at all.
Well, I tell you, you better email me when you're coming to Colorado for skiing because whatever event you're going to, I definitely will be showing up.
Sounds good.
So what makes a Caldwell cigar lounge a Caldwell cigar lounge?
Like as a retailer?
Correct. Do you pick and choose? Are you not picky? If they have like one little cabinet, are you like fuck off? Like
no,
what do you
I mean, listen, we're equal opportunity sales company. So we have some brands that have metrics that you have to abide by to carry. Being Anastasia, I guess, is really the one, and in certain limited editions, there's rules by which you have to play to carry those brands. But then outside of that, I mean, listen, like if you're a brick and mortar retailer that's the middle of fucking nowhere and you have a tiny humidor and you got like a really blue collar crowd and a lot of our cigars are expensive, so we have Blind Man's Bluff. It's a more everyday price point. We're happy to sell you one facing of that brand. So we do work with retailers. And Caldwell, I'm not going to sell you a box of Eastern Standard. You got to buy 15 to open. But
Okay.
Blind Man's Bluff, you want to buy a box. I mean, if I could sell you a half a box, I'd sell you a half a box. But that's the brand that we have that's supposed to reach everybody. So we really have no constraints on it because we want people to try the product. And then, hopefully you go, if your lounge doesn't carry it, hopefully you find the other stuff somewhere else. But that's a brand that was built to kind of like, work for everybody. And then Caldwell's, you got to buy 15 boxes. So we want a little bit of shelf presence. And then outside of that, Anastasia is the one that's really protected. And then if you play ball with us when we come out with a limited edition, you're going to get first picking. And normally the limited stuff goes, to 50 accounts. It doesn't go to everybody anyways. So there's usually not much left over to chew on once we get through our kind of key guys.
Okay, that makes sense. Real quick, anybody? So Ronnie from Secreto Lounge, definitely jump over. And Ronnie, maybe you'll be so kind as to create a really quick promo code RMCS for people to do some Caldwell deals during the show, and then extend them out for the rest of the day. Ronnie, if that's something you're open to, please reply in the comments what that is, and let's get some sales over.
Fuck
to
that!
You
Make him give you some
Caldwell.
sponsorship money. Make it pay to play, motherfucker. Ronnie, Venmo me $100.
Hey, as long as the viewers of the show get a deal on your cigars, that's really what makes me happy.
And actually, Ronnie has a very good selection of pretty much everything. So that's a good guy to have on the show.
Absolutely. That's why I was saying if you wanted to do a promo code and post it, you're more than welcome to, Ronnie, and we'll try to get you some sales for the show.
Ronnie's probably got like 5 devices open right now, and he's fucking just trolling for these shows trying to get promo codes for his website. So you just gave him a freebie.
Perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine. I like Ronnie. So I do want to ask you, so when you started with Hotel Humidor and you're doing this blending, did you take any of those cigars to Caldwell? And kind of what was what you looked at? What was the cigars that you looked at for Hotel Humidor different than how you pick cigars today for your brand?
Well, my palate was different then, I suppose. Like, I've always been a lighter smoker, but I was more of a novice in terms of knowledge. When I had that company, I still have it actually, but when I was actively involved there, and so for me, light was always like Connecticut, and to me now, light's Habano. So I smoke largely Habanos. I smoke lighter Habanos, some lighter Corojos, but mainly it's lighter Habano wrapper. That's like my go-to, I guess, wrapper. And I have a lot of fucking Habano blends because Habano, I think it's a very versatile leaf. So, but back then, when it came to what I was doing stuff, like a lot more stuff with Connecticut. And I had my training wheels still on, so I wasn't actively involved in much of anything. And then a brand that I started working on when I had that business was actually King is Dead. That took me like 6-7 years to build that blend. So I took it from Hotel Humidor, where I started working on it, through Winwood Cigar Factory, and then on to Caldwell, where we finally finished the blend. And that's now King is Dead. And then Long Live the King's a blend I had in Miami at the factory with Christian that then I ported and produced in DR with different components, but that's where that was born. So I have a couple that kind of like trail me, I guess, for some time prior to this company.
Okay. So let's touch a little bit on your lost and found, because I was able to this year, with the help of a partner of mine, create a charity event, and we actually, I'm not releasing the number yet. We're going to release it here in a few weeks publicly, but we were able to outdo the fundraising that my expectations were for Ronald McDonald House Charities. So kind of touch a little bit about the pet project that you do, the charity that you raise for Lost and Found, and kind of how that came about. Because are you just going into manufacturers and looking at their supply that hasn't sold and trying it and saying I want every one of those? Kind of, how do you pick a Lost and Found, and then how do you name it?
So Lost and Found, when I was working on Caldwell as a brand and working on the brand concepts and the blends and shit, I was down in DR. And when I had the hotel business, I became friendly with a lot of manufacturers because we sold to like Four Seasons, Le Meridian, Mandarin Oriental, a lot of really high-end hotels. And so a lot of bigger cigar brands are like, hey, we want to get inside your humidors. And so I started working with a variety of different brands, you know, in a very friendly way. Do you want to come to Nicaragua? You want to come to Honduras? You want to come to DR? Come to factory bullshit, all that type of stuff. So I'd go. And I have always liked, like I said, like a lighter profile. And I also like really aged tobacco. So oftentimes when I'd go to Oliva and then I'd meet with Alberto Oliva and I'd say, hey, what happened to the Special S? Or, hey, do you have any of those, you know, the V, they had a Culebra when they launched the brand. And they always have some. And then on the way out the door, they're like, hey, thanks for your visit. Here's a fucking bundle. So I'd always, you know, it's kind of cool thing. So I was in DR working on Caldwell, went to another manufacturer, you know, did like kind of that, like met with them on some other shit, walked their factory, made a reference to a couple brands I liked that they no longer made. Or one of them was a size I think they discontinued. And then on the way out the door, it's like, thank you, Mr. Cole, for your visit. Here's a fucking goodie bag. So then I flew from DR to Miami to Ohio to meet Tony from La Barba because Tony had been producing with Christian Aroa. He'd blended his cigars in Wynwood at our factory, then was producing in Honduras, and then he was going to be switching to produce with me in DR. So I brought samples, brought him up for he and his father to smoke in Ohio, and had a meeting. And then I gave them some of these cigars I brought in the bundles from DR. And Tony's dad's been in the business 50 years. He was a partner in a brand called Fittipaldi that was like the race car driver's brand, but he's been around forever. Got a really good palate. And so he smokes, he lights this shit, and he just goes like this. He's like, and he's got a really, you know, he talks like this. And so he's like, Robert, what is this? And I said what it is. And he's like, well, I know what it is, but how'd you get it? And I'm like, well, I got them at the factory. So then he said, do they have more? I'm like, I don't know. So then I called that factory a couple of days later. I'm like, do you have more? Will you sell them? And what would the price be? And they said, yes, we do. Yes, we will. Here's the price. The one caveat, they're coming to you in butcher paper. That's it. We'll wrap them in tens and put them in butcher paper. So I'm like, all right. So I ended up buying those, which was pepper cream soda, and then One Night Stand, which was a Corojo Toro.
Amazing cigars if nobody's ever tried them.
And so we imported those. We sent them up to Tony. Tony had a girl working with him named Jacqueline Sears. Jacqueline came up with a concept. So she's like One Night Stand, stupid artwork, kind of funny name. Pepper cream soda, which was the flavor profile of that cigar. It was peppery, it was creamy, and it was like kind of like effervescent-y, sparkly through your nose. So they came up with these references. They threw them on the shelf at his store, at Tony's dad's store. And then he called me like 2 weeks later, and he's like, we sold them all. And this was like 7,000, 8,000 cigars or some bullshit like that. I don't remember exactly. But I was like, what? So they said, do you have anything more? So I said, I don't know. So I went back to the factory and started just like excavating old stuff that they had. And then, so that started as a very small project. I want to say the first year we might have sold 10,000, 12,000 cigars, primarily to Tony's dad's store. And then, it slowly started to build, and then we started adding concepts. So we added a bunch of brands. And so Lost and Found, it went from me being like, knock on the door, hey, what do you have? Primarily from one or two manufacturers to them just saying, here's our fucking inventory list. And then us slowly, ordering samples of 20 different ones, smoking them. We like these, ordering those in, packaging them. So it was always kind of like Lost and Found. I mean, we'd find good old shit that was either sorted out because the color was wrong, so it didn't fit the rest of the color, too dark or too light, or sometimes you had a particular size that sold very slowly, and then after it's aged 20 months or 24 months in an aging room, it tastes very dissimilar from the rest of the line. So then they just kind of say okay, and they carve those out, and they use younger cigars that fit better with the more recently manufactured cigars, and then they become effectively Lost. You'll have brands that cut sizes. So we don't make Lonsdales, Lanceros, Torpedoes, Pyramids, Petit Coronas, you name it, all the shit that's not popular. So we were able to grab a ton of that stuff. And then, of course, you have brands that just discontinued. So you might have something that they say, okay, this didn't quite work, so we're going to go back to the drawing board or just kill it. And the cool thing with some of those is some of that shit that I smoked, I'm like, yeah, I remember that cigar. It wasn't very good. And then you smoke it 10 years later and you're like, what the fuck? This cigar is so goddamn good because the aging. So that's what Lost and Found was. And then a couple of years ago, we started toying with manufacturing. So now we have like Lost and Found product, which comes in paper wrapped bundles with or without rings with stickers on them. and then everything else is coming in boxes. So we started manufacturing or remanufacturing. Remanufacturing being original manufacturer, original blend that we bought from them. We said, listen, we need more of this shit. Can you make it? They said, okay, fine. So we'll be manufacturing with the original manufacturers or producing the cigars at the old factory. So now we're at Tabacaleria William Ventura, which is where our brand's made, along with Room 101 and La Barba and Adventura Cigars. And then the prior factories, the father, like his little hobby factory. So that's the Lost and Found factory, which is called El Maestro, which has a very different
Okay.
thesis when it comes to
Sure.
manufacturing. But so what we said was, okay, we got to make cigars, age the shit out of them. So Lost and Found are aged between 2 and 4 years, depending on what it is, using very old tobaccos or like test crops. Like we just dropped one called Instant Classic. It's a box press. The wrapper's a hybrid of Habano and San Andres. Nobody, that fucking tobacco will never be there. It didn't work. They grew
Sure.
however much of it, 90% of it died. A little bit of it got through the fermentation channel. We were able to make 10,000 cigars. It'll never be back. It never existed. It'll never exist again. So we bought that test crop, which, by the way, is how King is Dead was born. The wrapper on King is Dead was grown the same way, and it turned into a commercially viable cigar or tobacco, excuse me. But with Lost and Found, we can do these dumb little iterations. So that was a limited edition of a production line, because Instant Classic is a production line, but now you have a limited because there was something cool. So that's what it's kind of grown into. And then we during the pandemic, we turned it into a vehicle to raise money, not from consumers, but from ourselves to do good shit. So we do a lot of charitable work. So we fed about 150,000 people during the pandemic via soup kitchens or food banks, shit like that. We provided 3,500 high quality, and I'll say extremely high quality toys to Toys for Tots through the holidays. Extremely high quality means your wife buys them instead of you. So it's not a Barbie, it's a fucking limited edition Barbie. And I'm like, how many of these you buy? She's like, whatever the quantity. And I'm like, we had a budget per toy. And she's like, yeah, but these are fucking cooler. They're limited edition. And I'm like, fuck you. So a lot of it, and like a lot of what we do, we give away 100% of the proceeds. Some of them we give away 50 cents a cigar, $1 cigar, 25%, or you'll have a fixed thing. Like we did one called Pavo. So Pavo, every pack fed a family of 5 Thanksgiving dinner. That costs
Amazing.
more than what we made from the cigar. So we
Sure.
matched, met, or beat the donation that came internally. So we did Tunnels to Tower Foundation for first responders. We've done all sorts of shit, a lot of educational after school stuff, inner city opportunities that we've had. So that's very cool. So that's kind of, we're not very vocal about that, but it's something that we do. And it's between 50 cents a cigar, which is a tremendous amount of money
It is.
to give anyways per cigar,
Mhm.
all the way up to like 300, 400% of the value of the cigar. Because sometimes we just go way harder. And then we perpetually donate to like animal shelters and shit. So they just auto draft out of our accounts every month. So that was kind of transitioned into something to do good. I don't even fucking know why. I mean, like, I dislike 99% of everything and everybody, but I mean, I care about people that can't take care of themselves, and I care about animals.
Absolutely.
So I
And you
said,
know
fuck it,
what?
let's do it.
And you know what? You know what I noticed? So I had 12 brands that were willing to donate to our event. And the one thing I've noticed in the cigar community that, to be honest with you, the Ronald McDonald Foundation was blown away at was how giving the cigar community is. And I think it's a misconception because of the political atmosphere with tobacco, is that the cigar community is an incredibly giving community, and it's an incredible great fellowship community. And so my experience with that is exactly what you said. A lot of these manufacturers do unpictured charity inside of their own org, because it's not about the Facebook post or the attaboy. It's about the fact that you give back because it just means more to you guys. So much of the cigar world is a family. And that's been one of my experiences with doing my own cigar-centric charity. But want to move over to some of these questions here real quick. Um, we have a question from John Lovell that apparently wants to see your face and was wondering if you can turn a light on.
Oh, is it that dark?
Yeah,
I just gotta switch. I gotta switch spots.
no worries.
You get a dick
While
shot
you're
for now.
while you're switching spots, we have a question here from Aaron that asks about when your Deep V Caldwell shirt is coming out.
I don't do V-neck T-shirts. Never. You just fuck me. You gotta buy a collared shirt and unbutton that shit.
Which is what
Fuck me.
which which is what Robert is wearing right now.
Yeah, I
We
just dropped my
also
water,
have
so you get to go with me to
we
the kitchen.
also have Gershon Hoffman, who's a friend of the show as well, that says hi.
What's up?
And then let's see. Robert, you probably, this is from Dan again. Robert, you probably done more collaborations than anyone else. Is there anyone that you will not do a collaboration with? And second part to that question, is there anyone that you wish you could do a collaboration with?
Uh, I mean, we did a lot of them. We didn't start that, but I think we finished it. We did a lot of really cool ones. My answer is going to be very ambiguous because there's a couple people that I would, but they'd be like fucking legends. Um, so we do that, I guess, if one of those opportunities arose, but I don't think that shit's happening. And then pretty much everybody else we wouldn't. So there's the vague answer. We had a couple proposals actually, a few years ago when we kind of stopped doing it for other brands. And I was just like, yeah, we kind of did that because we had like 5 of them. We were really good at that.
So I actually want to ask you about
man.
the AJ collaboration that you did.
Yeah.
Like how does that happen? Do you reach out to AJ? Does AJ smoke your cigar and say, "Hey, Robert, I'd like to"?
Can you see me better now?
We can see a little bit better, but that's fine. We could hear you. We could hear you.
So all my outdoor lights are like fucking from my phone. I'm afraid if I move over this thing, I might lose you or some shit to turn them on. So that might be the best that we got.
I mean, yeah, you're fine. I don't. As long as we can hear you, we can see you.
All right,
and stuff like that. But so how does that? How does a collaboration inside the Caldwell world happen? Does somebody reach out to you and say, "I want to do this"? Did you reach out to AJ and say, "Hey, I'd like you to do this"? How did that?
So
happen?
we've had 4 of them, ish. The first being, I guess, really like the original Anastasia. I guess kind of was a collaborative effort with Carrillo, because the first cigar I ever smoked came out of his factory, and I thought it was cool to like full circle it back and make something with him. And then it was molded after, like, to me, what was a perfect cigar, and I think Anastasia is a perfect cigar. And then we did All Out Kings with Drew Estate. That one, Jonathan actually approached me, which was super cool. And we got talking, and we did that 3 ways. So it was Jonathan, Willie Herrera, and I. And then the next one was Hit and Run, and then the T. So Hit and Run was with Matt Booth. And then the T, we were working on Hit and Run, and then Matt had stopped making cigars for a little while. He'd left the industry altogether. He came back with like kind of Hit and Run as this limited concept. And then he was kicking tires of whether or not to make more, like, a core line. And he was going to Nicaragua to meet with AJ Fernandez. Matt's Spanish is somewhat limited, so I speak Spanish fluently. And he says, "Can you come with me and kind of like just, tee this shit up a little bit?" So AJ and I have been friends since AJ had one single table at the trade show. I met him coming off an airplane when he like literally had a folding table his first year. And AJ had always pestered me about doing something with him, but AJ's name for a while was kind of just synonymous with Cigars International and discount bundles, if you remember in the beginning.
Yep.
So I was very apprehensive to doing anything with him because our cigars were very premium priced. His cigars historically were cheaper, and I didn't want to like bring down our price point or dumb it down because it was going to be an expensive project because it's expensive to make cigars with AJ. because his process is tobacco shit like this. So then I go to meet with Matt and AJ, and then Matt's talking to AJ about making a cigar, and then AJ's like, well, why don't you make a cigar with me, talking to me also? And then I'm like, well, I'm making one with Matt. And then it came out like this triangle emerged, which ended up being the T, which was AJ, Matt Booth, and I.
Yep.
So that was a very oh shit, we had one after that. So that was a very kind of just serendipitous opportunity. And then while I was working on that project with AJ, I was going back and forth to Nicaragua, and AJ had asked me at one point to bring my cigars so he could experience the Caldwell brand. And he told me, brother, all your cigars are shit. I don't like any of them. I'm like, fuck you too. So I came back to Miami, and then I went back to Nicaragua a couple weeks later. And AJ's like, you know what? He's like, I was wrong. He's like, I really like King is Dead and Long Live the King. And then the guy that works with him in the office, like, here's what happened. He got a fucking cold, couldn't smoke for like a week. His palate, like, you know, came back to like, you know, he just smoked 6 cigars a day. So he's like, he got back to, you know, probably where it should have been. And he smoked them and really enjoyed the cigars. I'm like, okay, cool. So great. Well, I think when you're blending a lot of Nicaraguan tobacco, it's very hard to taste the subtlety and nuance that that exists with a lot of brands like ours.
Correct.
So anyways, he liked them. So when I was leaving, he gave me a bundle of two bundles of cigars. And I said, what are these? And he said, these are my iterations of your brands. So this is my version of King is Dead, my version of Long Live the King. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, I smoked them. I love the experience. So I wanted to blend you a bundle of each using my tobacco of like where I would carry that, like using my tobacco. I'm like, cool. Thank you. Come back to Miami, smoke them. They're killer. And I go back to Nicaragua, and AJ's like, well, we should do something together. Let's do a limited edition. Do you have any ideas? I'm like, AJ, you fucking with me? He's like, no. He's like, really, like, we need a really good concept. We need something to sell. I'm like, AJ, last time I'm here, you gave me 2 interpretations of my brands using your tobacco, which you gave me as gifts. Sell the gift. I'm like, we do King is Dead and Long Live the King by AJ Fernandez. Commercialize what happened. So that was super cool because that was a completely organic experience. And the brand's exactly what it was. I mean, it was his, if I made this cigar in Nicaragua, this is what I would do to make it appeal to the same exact smoker as enjoys the Dominican versions. So that was very cool. And we just had a little more of that splash. We had a fucking lost and then found pallet inside of AJ's warehouse that we were made aware of. So we just shipped a little bit of that out that we were able to receive. That's 4 years old.
That's awesome. And you know what? So, and I'm not expecting you to go back and watch this because it was very early on in my show. But one of my first reviews, I think it was probably my 3rd or 4th review I ever did, cigar review for the show before I started doing live episodes, was on the Hit and Run Part 2. And that was an absolutely fantastic cigar. So again, it just goes to show why I wanted you on, because it kind of brings me full circle with you were one. The Hit and Run was one of my firsts in the review world. But we actually have a question here from Kevin again, and as you know, Kevin is definitely one of the most well researched people inside when he does his interviews. He said, "What's the story behind the Manzanita?" Robert Holt, Southern Draw, for those of you that don't know, also has it, and I heard you allowed him to use the name, which is very rare inside the cigar industry. Most of the time, same names result in a cease and desist. So, can you speak to that a
Well,
little bit?
after you have a couple companies send you cease and desist letters for having something that they find similar, even though it has fucking absolutely zero similarity, and you're forced to destroy packaging. When somebody approaches you with the same concern, you let them play ball. We had on 2 instances times where we had to destroy packaging. One of them I actually kind of understand a little bit. The other one was a complete fucking joke. And that company didn't even have it protected. And it happened to be the first and last initials of their name. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? So we had to destroy packaging. So we developed that cigar for Nat Sherman, New York. They asked for a cigar that they could sell in the winter. It was actually put onto me by Barry, who worked there, who's fucking awesome. And he's like, why don't you call it the Little Apple? So Little Apple in Spanish is manzanita. So the idea was like a very small version of our core brands, King's Dead, Longer King, Eastern Standard. So fast forward until last year, Robert Holt calls me, and he's texting me or message, whatever. And he's like, hey, you got a minute? I'm like, okay. So I get on the phone with him, and he's like, dude, I'm rolling out a brand tomorrow. We're boxed, we're banded, we're landed, we're ready to go. It's called Manzanita. He's like, I don't know how I didn't check, but you're using that mark. Can I use it? I'm like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. So we have, but the difference is also I don't have a brand called Manzanita. So I have Manzanita that exists across 3 of my brands, and it's a size. So legally, I could stop him from using it, or I could have, I suppose. But that's being a fucking asshole. Correct. So I think there's very little confusion. We have a cigar called My Style is Jalapeno that everybody calls jalapeno. And then
it's a 7x40, right?
7x40. Yes. And then somebody came out with a cigar called jalapeno. I'm like, whatever. So I mean, we've had a couple where we barked because it's like, motherfucker, you're right on our front door with that bullshit. And then we've had a couple that have done a very good job executing packaging. One of which said we were inspired by your brand. They're no longer in business; they're out of business now, but they were very much inspired by our marketing, and people so much so that people thought it was our brand when they released. And then there's another brand that has a product that's very Caldwell-esque in terms of presentation, which is fine, but people confuse that brand for our cigar very often. The good thing is it's a good fucking cigar. So I'm like, all right, cool. Like, you're welcome. I like that cigar too. And then us at the same time, we have Long Live the King, which is like, a younger legal smoking age guy wearing a crown. And then there's a brand called Crowned Heads. So a lot of times guys will tag us in crowned head shit and vice versa. I didn't even think about it. It's a guy wearing a crown. But after the fact, I'm like, oh shit. And that brand existed before us. So, I don't know. To me, this is an industry, what should be an industry of gentlemen, which 98% of the time is. Sometimes you fuck up. Sometimes people fuck up, and I think you got to give them a bone when they step on your toes accidentally, so long as it's not infringing too hardly on your marks or causing you dire consequences with your business.
And that makes sense because, like you said, Manzanita was a size for you. It wasn't a line. So in that sense, as much as you could stop that based on the name Manzanita, it's not a line for you. So in your mind, it's not a direct encroachment.
No. And exactly. And had we stopped him, we would have just fucked him. Correct. So then it's like, all right, you want to fuck the guy or you not want to fuck the guy?
Yeah.
And we had actually a similar, we had an issue this year where there's a brand that's using something somewhat similar to one of our marks. And I said, listen, how much packaging do you have? And they said, we have enough for X amount of cigars. I said, how long is it going to take you to sell them? They said, it's going to take us this long to sell them. 6 months, call it. I said, all right. And I said, how do you refer to the cigar? And they referred to the cigar by its name. And I said, I don't want you to do that. I want you to refer to the cigar as, this is an Eastern Standard 44x4, let's say, we're at the Manzanita instead of using that terminology, but leave it on the box, leave it on the band. I'm not going to fuck you.
Sure.
And then we had a gentleman's agreement. We shook hands. They're going to sell through it. And then they're going to switch the name. They're still going to have it present, but they're going to do it in a more laid back way because I don't want to tie them up either. Because, and that's a much smaller brand than us. So then all you're doing is you're causing a financial hardship on somebody. And this has been done to us, by the way. So we've had hurdles we've had to jump from major brands just fucking with us. And it's not cool. So we don't do it. You give what you get.
For sure. And I agree with you on that. It's gentleman's agreement. There's an understanding. They've gone through the labor, the financial cost and you're essentially allowing them to sell through and then change after the fact because you've experienced that, you understand what the receiving side feels like.
Yeah.
So I want to kind of ask you a little bit because, like I say on this show, I'm a really big believer in having mentors, and I know you've been in the industry in multiple different facets on the buying, the creating, the selling, and pretty much everything in between. So I wanted to ask you, do you have any mentors? Feel free to give names if you feel so choose to. Do you believe in having mentors in your own life, either it be personal mentors, and let me just kind of define what I define as a mentor. It's somebody that will be honest with you and that you will not talk to for a couple of weeks because they were too truthful with you and you didn't want to hear it. So, do you have any of those people in your life that you reach out to either in a business or a personal way?
Absolutely. Within the cigar industry, I mean, on the tobacco side, William Ventura, that he was one of the first several guys that started like Davidoff production in DR. He's owns the factories in which we work. So I mean, with a lot of stuff, he and I have identical palates. He's just been doing it for 50 years or whatever the fuck. So I very much respect his interpretation of the manufacturing side of the industry when it comes to flavor and shit like that, tobaccos to use. I've always thought Carrillo was fucking amazing. Like or dislike his cigars, because I think he's one of those brands that some people are like, eh. But like Ernesto, he sold his company. He did it. He was done. He started making cigars again because he likes making fucking cigars. That's what,
Correct.
and it's not the only thing Ernesto knows what to do. Ernesto has other shit that he does, but he loves making fucking cigars and he does it in a prideful way. And we've been out of touch the last several years, but I mean, I'd ride around DR with Ernesto in the car and he listens to elevator music, literally, and he'll play like, air drums and shit to elevator music, which is interesting. But I've always enjoyed my conversations with him, and oftentimes outside of cigars, about life or fucking. We both have a mutual love for the country of Spain, and that's where our conversations originally started. AJ as well, but in a much lighter effect. And really, I mean, I like if I'm in a room with a ton of manufacturers, I don't say a goddamn thing. I keep my fucking mouth shut because I think you
Why?
can learn from everybody, and I'm very much that way in life too. Like, not necessarily the respect your elders thing, but respect the wisdom that they possess.
Hmm.
So I like to be a sponge when I'm around people and try to pick up what I can. And being a fly on the wall in the room with a bunch of manufacturers is also a very, very easy thing to do because a lot of manufacturers are very prideful and they're very, you know, they want to tell you shit. So if you just shut the fuck up and you listen, there's a hell of a lot you can learn. So I'd say the industry as a whole, I've always, you know, I'm just a quiet guy that's going to listen when I'm around people that know more than me. And then
Right.
in life, I have several. I had a long time kind of mentor that passed away years ago. That was awesome. And then I have an uncle of mine that I talk to frequently, and then I have a retailer that I'm very close to. That's a very successful guy, bit older than me, outside cigar industry successful, and I bounce shit off him. And then I have a friend of mine in Miami, which, funny enough, if he found out I called him a mentor, he'd fucking die because I think he looks at us as equals. But he's about 10 years older than me, been there, done that, and made it. You know, so I'm a sponge, man. I like to learn. I ask a lot of questions. Um,
Yep.
I'll talk if you ask me questions, but typically socially, I'm a listener and I read. I don't own TVs. I read. I'm thirsty for knowledge.
So, what in your mind like, obviously you don't, like, any mentor of mine has just kind of naturally adopted, right? It's not like you have that discussion where you sit down and be like, You're going to be my mentor." So what do you look for in somebody that you respect enough to where even if they tell you something you don't want to hear, you still absorb and learn from that.
Well, I guess the most important is wisdom, but then wisdom coming from the wrong source is irrelevant to you. So I'd say you have to have a common interpretation of life. So, like,
Okay.
this is the way I see life. This is what's important to me. These are what the values are. This is where I want to end up. And then finding somebody that has wisdom, that if you emulate what they've given you or the path that they've taken, keeping in mind. Because I mean, listen, I could have a mentor that's a fucking workaholic Fortune 500 company president. That guy has nothing in common with me. I don't want to
Right.
fucking be working in 20 years. I don't want to work that hard. I'm not working all weekend. I'm not dedicating my life to fucking grinding, at a big, like, so there's nothing in common at that point. You might be able to take bits and pieces of knowledge from that guy and put them into your life and make them meaningful to yourself. But when it comes to being a mentor, the mentor's like, it's the hard questions, you know, that are going to get the hard answers, just like you said. And
Yep.
a lot of people have, and actually my business partner Hernando's dad is like that as well. I'd say I ask him, a lot of shit, but it's like, this is the way I see life. What matters to me is boom, 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 boom. This is where I want to be in 10, 15, 20 years, which is, by the way, not fucking working or not working myself to death. I'm put here on earth to enjoy the goddamn planet. So I don't give a fuck how many trillions of dollars you could have being a successful businessman. That's not for me. But what is for me is like, I want to sit and watch the sunset and smoke a fucking cigar with my
Sure.
wife and like look at turtles and shit. So find the guy that also has that same interest as you, that's older than you, that's been there, done that, gotten to a point in life at which you want to be, probably not financially, but more mentally and spiritually, and
Sure.
then find that guy
Sure.
to bounce shit off of. Because they'll give you the right answers.
Now, is it important for you to be able to look up to somebody that will tell you you're fucking wrong? To where, again, I've had mentors that I have stopped talking to for about a week and a half because the information or the advice that they gave me was correct, but it was more than what I was willing to swallow. So, do you think that is a definite focal point of what a mentor should be?
Yeah, but I don't. So yes, but then differences between people. I don't think I've ever had anybody tell me anything that would like dissuade me from talking to them. Like nothing ruffles my feathers, I guess, in that sense. Um, it maybe if it's something that I completely disagree with, water off a duck's back. But then to your point, my experience to what you're saying, as your experience, mine would be like contemplation of it subconsciously. So maybe somebody says something that I'm like, that guy's a fucking moron, which those words leave my mouth like at least 1,000 times a day. But sometimes shit sticks in your head, and a few days later you're like, that guy was right. So it might not be, to where I would stop talking to them, but I would just immediately dismiss or discount what they had to say, and then upon looking back on it, or it stays in your head for a reason. So then 10 days
Correct.
later you're like, dude,
Correct.
fucking smart, and that's why I got him, because he's got the wisdom to know this before I could even recognize it, right? But then
Correct.
my experience would be a little different in how I handled it. Because and I don't cut people out for 10 days. They're fucking gone.
Well,
That
like for instance, I'm in sales, right? So when one of my very close mentors told me I wasn't doing something the way I should have been doing it, I should have taken a different approach. I disagreed, and then I finally took his approach, and I was successful. So for me, it was kind of I was too much of a fucking stubborn asshole to swallow his advice and take heed of it. So for me, one of the hardest things where I know somebody is becoming that mentorship status is when I start to get incredibly real with that person to where the advice they're giving me is something different than I'm doing now, but the advice they're giving me is what I should be doing moving forward.
yes. So you and I are similar. So the easiest way to go through a wall is by smashing your fucking head against it. Don't use the door. Yeah. I'm the same. I mean, listen, anybody who works with me, I'm like the most stubborn, hard-headed, fucking ridiculous motherfucker. Like I'm the worst. But I'm also quick to realize when I've been outplayed or like I'm smashing my head against the wall and then somebody walks by me and they're like, you know, the door is here and I told you it was here. And you're like, oh yeah. So I mean, I'm very similar in that. But I also like the trial and error of making my own mistakes. I was having a conversation with my wife last night because we were talking about somebody and she, you know, her comments like, you know, this guy can't get out of his own way because he's scared to fail. And I'm like, yeah. Or she said he's scared to try. And I said, yeah, he's scared to try because he's scared to fail. Right. And she's like, yeah. And some people are just built that way. And then if you look at my life from an outsider looking in the cigar industry is one thing, but among my group of friends, it's a different thing because I have other things that I'm involved in. And I had a close friend of mine say last year to me, he's like, you know, you've had a really lucky streak, like a winning streak the last few years with a variety of shit, right? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like, Sebastian, I'm like, it's not a lucky or winning streak. What it is like, you get up and you swing and you keep swinging. And I'm like, I have struck out, fucking grounded out of bounds so many goddamn times. I've started at least 20 businesses. 3 of them have turned out to be viable. So my failure rate's, you know, fucking 85%. I've taken so many missteps, but the point is you just keep getting back up, right? And you keep taking those chances. And to me, that's pounding my head against the fucking wall. Because sooner or later I'm gonna get through the wall. And then on the back side of the wall, you're like, shit, there was a fucking door. And that's part of the pathway to me at some point in my life when I'm older, being a mentor to like my nephew. Once I've gained the wisdom that I'm like, yo, jackass, there's a fucking door. Like your dad told me there was a door. I didn't listen to him. The door's right there. But that's part of the process, I think, of getting through life. And that's why, you know, you get these old dudes that are sitting there that are like 75 or 80 and they just smile all the time. Part of it's because they're fucking senile, right? But then the other part of it's because they're tranquil because they've gotten to the point where they understand life. And I think until you hit whatever stride that is, call it 60, like, you know, when you start entering the first part of the tunnel, you know, you're just not going to get there because you don't understand where we are. Because you got to keep putting your head through the wall.
Correct. So, just for anybody watching, I'm a firm believer in failure, in failing, I should say. I was one of those people in sales that was afraid to fail with a deal with closing it. But can you kind of give your perspective on what it means to fail and what it means to get back on the bike?
So to me, a failure means that you need to revisit why you failed. So if it's a sales experience, okay, this didn't work. Why? You know, so that could be changing your approach or like the guy doesn't need it. What does he need? And it depends also how you sell. Like my way of selling, if you're a retailer of mine, I'll next to never call you and try to sell you some shit. Well, I believe in my product. I believe in what I sell. I believe in what I do. And it doesn't matter what it is. Anything that I do in life, um, in a business sense, I do it because I believe in it. So it's me transmitting my belief onto you. So if you're a retailer, I'm going to tell you the story of the brand and why I built the brand and why it's romantic to me, and I'm going to get you to want to buy it. But sometimes it just doesn't work. And like so a failure to me in sales just means you haven't found the right angle to get through. You know, like you tried it with a circle, you got to go with a square, you got to go with a triangle, and sooner or later you're going to get through that hole that you're trying to get through. And I think a lot of salespeople, they just kind of like, they're like, well, I tried them 10 times, it didn't work. Maybe the 11th time works. So you have to keep at it. And then what was your other part of the question?
Um,
Falling off the bike.
yes, no, getting like after you've realized that you have failed, for some people that's crippling. That's a
Yeah.
crippling feeling. So what gives you the ability, what have you learned that gives you the ability to get back on the bike and go, every failure means I'm that much closer to a fucking success?
Part of it with me personally is like I was born with a giant fucking chip on my shoulder. So my motivation for success And actually, that's not a chip against anybody else. It's like an internal thing. So I have like this
Correct.
somewhat never satisfied feeling. Um, not in terms of like, oh, nice. Is that the Manzanita or is that the?
This is the Robusto.
Oh, okay.
This is
Looks
the
small.
let's see, the 5x50.
Perfect. So part of it, I think it's. I mean, not everybody's a sales guy either, right? But if you're not a sales guy, you can be a romance maker. So you just got to get them to
Correct.
fall in love with whatever the fuck you're in love with. But to me, the I don't know. I got a chip on my shoulder, and I'm gonna keep doing it till we're done. Like we're gonna get to the finish line. But then also you have to know when you failed beyond repair and just fucking throw in the towel. And sometimes you get to that point where you just got to throw in the towel. And I think the guys that are crippled by failure, you go look at Apple, Tesla, Google, Microsoft. Go look at any of those companies. Look at two things. Look at where they started and where they are now, right?
Yep.
They none of them started doing this and they still do it. They pivoted. They started doing this and they ended up over here, right? So it took them they had to change what they were doing. And all that is adaptation of the concept. So, you start here and then you slowly make little turns until you end up over here and that works. And that's them doing the square, circle. Okay, it's a triangle. It's just constantly adapting the concept until you finally get to a point where whatever you're doing has found its traction and now it's moving forward. And then if you look at any of those companies like stock market charts, it looks like, like Tesla's like that, Microsoft, like, they're like up and to the right or they're straight up. But if you zoom in on that shit, it's like a fucking jagged thing all the way up. And every time it went up, it went back down, up, and then but what happened was the perseverance of the company pushed it from down into the left to up and to the right, and that took a course of time, and it took a lot of small pivots and a lot of small, which turned out to be big decisions of these companies to say, okay, we failed at this, let's try that. We failed at this, and then 10 years later, you have this fucking powerhouse of a company, and that's just whether it's the team or the company or the visionary behind it saying, no, we're going to continue to pivot and we're going to continue to push. And that's what it takes. When I started Caldwell, I wanted to make cheap cigars. Like I wanted to make $4 to $6 retail cigars. I miserably fucking failed. And guys would ask me like, hey, what happened to Sevillana or Murcias, Gibraltar, my first brands? And I had Caldwell, like King is Dead Longer than King Eastern also. But my sales volume was meant to come out of the cheaper stuff. And I'm like, that shit didn't work out. And they're like, oh, sorry to hear that. I'm like, I'm selling the expensive shit, motherfucker. Like, I don't care. But we just pivoted concept immediately. We destroyed all the packaging. We changed what we were doing as a company and said, okay, this is where our niche is, and let's double down there. And then that's the other thing too, is when you're successful, you double down. You have to pursue the opportunities that are rewarding you.
Take the
instead
risk.
of chasing the ones that are fucking, bleeding you.
So before we move on to a little bit more of Robert Caldwell's like personal, what when you started, what was so different to how you looked at the industry now versus how you looked at it then, since you're more into it now? And then what is some advice you would give to somebody that called you up and said, hey, I'm looking to make my first 100 boxes. What advice would you give me?
I suppose when I came into the industry, I was a bit naive. In many ways, part of it, like we had the conversation about PCA, but you think certain guys are there to hold your hand and be your friend when in fact they're not. You think, I had a great experience, which is I walked into a retailer. I walk in, dudes get up. They're like, can you sign my fucking box? Can we take a picture? Look, I'm smoking King is Dead. Look, I'm smoking Longer Than the King. And this was an account I didn't have. And then I walk to the counter, pull out the sales sheet, give it to the guy. This was like the fourth visit. And, we're going to write a fucking order because everybody in your store is smoking my shit.
Correct.
And the guy's like, no, well, what makes you think I'm going to buy your brand? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Like, you got 7 guys in your lounge smoking my brand. They bought it down the street. So there's a lot of that type of bullshit that just makes no sense to you that I think never will. You like people are like, I don't smoke Caldwell because I like this brand. And I'm like, that brand's made in fucking Nicaragua. It's full body, has nothing to do with my brand. You're a retailer. You shouldn't sell only what you like. Or if there's some political bullshit reason that you support that brand and you can't support mine, like your job is to sell fucking cigars and have a spectrum of flavor for your consumers.
Yep.
So I think a lot of that shit when I came in the industry was I expected that part of it to be different, like a little less political than it is internally. And then also at the same time, I didn't expect, like, we got help from everybody when we started. We had a lot of manufacturers reaching out. What can we help you? Like Alan Rubin was printing flyers for me. Davidoff was helping me with some of my financials and shit. People were helping me source tobacco, price checking. So guys were trying to make sure that we were competitive coming to market, which was really cool. Got a lot of help. So that was really cool. So I guess the industry on both positive and negative wasn't what I expected it to be in terms of participation from manufacturers and retailers on both sides of the sword. And then if you're going to make a cigar, don't make a fucking cigar. Don't do it.
Why?
I think you got to come at it with $100,000
Okay.
minimum, maybe $250. We invested $96,000 in our company in the beginning. We had to invest $250,000 the year or year and a half that followed. Luckily, my partners had a little bit of coin, so we fundraised internally. But we were so fucking successful that we had to drop $250,000 in the company. If you're starting with 100 boxes, you're out of business. 1,000 boxes, you're out of business. 20,000, you're out of business. $20,000, I'm saying. You got to come at it with. I mean, it costs money to grow. So if you don't have the money to invest, you'll never be a viable brand. And then there's just a lot of other things you could do that are better. Okay. So, I mean, it's a very deflating response. But you see a lot of guys, you know, you see the guys treading water that have been doing this for 15 years that are undercapitalized. And whether they're successful or not successful, they love doing what they do, which is cool. But they have a very hard time making ends meet. Sure. And so the romance of coming in and hitting it is very unfeasible. And I think if you're an outsider looking in, it's like, oh, Caldwell came out of nowhere. We sold 250,000 cigars our first year, you know, and a lot of brands that look like they did that. There's money behind those fucking brands.
Sure.
There's money behind the brands. There's been no one that's come out and skyrocketed on a shoestring budget. It doesn't exist. You're out of fucking business. You're done. So
absolutely. So before we change topics here, Miguel, forgive me, Miguel, if I butcher your name. Miguel Chivada is asking you to send him more car stock.
Tell him to suck a dick.
Okay. All right. Well, you heard it right there, Robert or Miguel. I asked Robert your question, and that is what he says.
Suck it, Miguel.
I will assume you know who he is.
He's one of my sales guys.
Oh, okay.
He wants more samples.
So, Robert, you had mentioned earlier in the show that you're a big reader. So I wanted to ask you, what is one of your favorite books, and what is a book you've read in the last 6 months that you would recommend to people?
Favorite book. There's a couple that I think are very cool. I can't remember necessarily all the names, but there's one about Patagonia. That's incredibly fucking cool. It's like the history of Patagonia, the outdoors company. You got to read it. I mean, it's just really, like, to me, an iconic. I think it's called Let My People Go Surfing. It's fucking awesome. Because I read books and I give them away. There's a few that I don't give away. Like, I keep it. So that's one of the ones that I kept.
Are you a highlighter?
No.
Okay.
No. And I don't retain all the information either. And I don't take notes or anything. I think what sticks and what doesn't. Richard Branson is fucking awesome author because he's a fun guy, super successful guy. And I think he writes what matters. There's a lot of facets to Richard Branson outside the business. part of who he is, and I think that's really special. All of his books are killer. First one I read was called Losing My Virginity, but he's a great author. And then I read one recently. So I read a lot of like business biographies, but like
Okay.
every fucking one, like you name it, I fucking read it. Every one. Because I was reading like 60 books a year, let's say.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I read a lot. And then now I switched and I read like biology and shit. So I'm studying like oceanography and marine biology. Last year I was studying architecture. So I like to learn shit. But then recently I read a book that's called The Outlaw Ocean. That's about all the shit that happens in the ocean that you don't know happens, from like fishing to slavery to pollution, shit like that. It's really cool. It's somewhat like, it's not political by any means, but I imagine like I'm kind of right down the middle. But I imagine to some people like maybe they would disagree with some of like the ocean plastic shit that they're talking about. But I mean, like that's a
Sure.
real thing. You're in
Sure.
denial. But that's a really fucking amazing book. So that's one that I would recommend. It's a thick book. It's really good. Outlaw Ocean.
Are we talking like War and Peace thick?
It's probably about 600, 700 pages.
Holy cow. Okay. So are you a novel reader or are you just educational nonfiction?
Educational nonfiction. The other one is Andre Agassi wrote a book that's fucking amazing. It's the like you have to read that one because Andre Agassi hated fucking tennis. He hated
Yep.
playing tennis. He hated every minute of tennis, and it's awesome. And when I was little, like I loved Agassi because everybody did. And I grew up and live in Miami, so I'd go to the tennis tournament here. And my sister liked Pete Sampras, and I liked Agassi. And I liked him because he smashed his racket, he cursed and spit at you and shit.
Sure.
And I asked him for a signature on a tennis ball, and he told me, "Give me $100 and I'll sign it for you." And I'm like, "Fuck you." And that was the day I started disliking Agassi, and I never liked Agassi again until I read his book. And I'm like, I get it, I feel it. That's my dude again. So we had like a rekindling after 24 years or 5 years of me saying fuck Andre Agassi because now I understand very well what was going on in his head the whole time he was
Sure.
playing. So that's a killer book. But yeah, I don't really read fiction at all. It's mainly biographical stuff or like science shit and architecture, history, and that's about it.
Well, we actually, I cannot believe it. We have Tony. Tony, thank you so much for joining. He says, fuck Caldwell with a PHUC.
Who is
So,
Tony?
Tony Bellotto.
Who is Tony Bellotto?
Who knows?
I need to get a charger.
Hopefully Tony will eventually grace the show. Tony, you're always welcome
Fuck.
on. So I wanted to ask you, what does Robert do when he's not Caldwell Cigars Robert Caldwell?
Like in my free time?
Yeah, what do you do? Do you fish? Do you surf? Do you boat? Do you
Uh, I,
suntan? What
I
do you
like.
do?
Fuck me. Sorry about that. I just dropped your phone on the floor. I like to do anything outdoors. Yeah, your phone. I like to do anything outdoors. Uh, I like to ride bike ride a lot. I'm getting one of Tony's little mini cigars here. I like to ride bike. I travel a lot. I like to eat. I like to cook. Do cool shit.
What's some of your favorite food?
I like Spanish and Italian food. My wife's Spanish, but I have like a very big love. Like Spain and Italy, I think are very good at highlighting the individual ingredients that's put into something. So, whereas like French or Mexican, maybe it's like sauces and they kind of blend a lot of shit together. The Spanish and Italian kitchen are more like, I don't know, like you're very bold. You know exactly what the fuck is in there. But I
Sure.
respect that a lot. But I mean, Italian food and Spanish food are my shit.
If you had a historical person, I don't know if you're a religious guy or not, but besides Jesus, or Winston Churchill, who would you smoke a cigar with, and what Room 101 cigar or Lost and Found would you give them?
Motherfucker, Room 101. Who's that?
Or not Room 1. I'm sorry.
Never even
sorry.
heard of that brand.
Caldwell. What Caldwell or Lost and Found would you give
By the
them?
way, you did that during the intro too.
Did I really? Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's all
I'm
good.
sorry. I had
Fuck
the
Matt
hit
Booth.
and run on my mind.
No, it's all good. I was texting with Matt. I was talking to Matt before this. Repeat the question. Who would I smoke a cigar with?
A historical person outside of Jesus or Churchill that you would smoke a cigar with, and what Caldwell or Lost and Found would you give them to smoke?
Well, I'm not including dictators.
No, just any historical figure.
Wait, let me see if my phone's charging. Hold on a second. Yes, it is. Historical figures.
Oh, we lost Robert here while he was charging his phone. I'm sure he'll jump right back in here. There he is right now, bringing it back in. Matt or Robert, play with your sound again. We can't hear you, so whatever you did last time to adjust your sound. No, still. No, still. Whatever you did last time to adjust your sound worked. Nope. There you go. Now we hear you.
Okay. True.
We could hear you.
I said Kennedy or Castro.
Kennedy or Castro. So, what cigar would you offer up of yours to smoke?
But with Castro happily, because I don't like Fidel Castro. But I want to know what the fuck some shit went down. There's a book called Brothers in Arms that's about it. Conspiracy theory shit is really good. Smoking Anastasia Corona, the first one, the green label.
Very nice, very nice. Are you do you drink alcohol? Yes?
No.
No, okay. So what pairing is your favorite? We could hear you, but you're kind of breaking in and out, not as clear as you were before.
Okay.
What is a cigar pairing with a drink that you like best?
I drink water when I smoke cigars. I drink nothing else. So sometimes like I'll enjoy coffee before, but I don't drink when I smoke at all. And then like people are always like, what should I pair with this? And then I'm kind of, and then your palate will tell you what you want.
Okay. Okay. What is your favorite cut? Do you bite? Do you straight cut? Oh, there you go.
I picked the
We get to see it
cap
right
off.
there.
You see that little tiny fucking La Barba?
There you go. That's a tiny little
You see, it's
Barbara.
like-
That's a Ricochet.
That's the one that when we do pictures with Tony, looks like a Toro. We give him that cigar. In his little fucking tiny hand, it looks like a Toro. It's a prop cigar.
What is your favorite coffee?
Espresso. Kimbo from Naples, Italy. It's fucking amazing. Regular coffee. There's a coffee in DR. It's called Monte Rio. Favorite coffee. But they roast this shit with like a couple of cacao beans. So
it has like a tiny, like little nuance of cacao on the. They throw like just a couple beans in there. I think that's really special coffee.
Okay, and we actually have Matt Booth joining us in the show tonight. He says, Rosewood, hear my name dripping from your mouth hole.
Motherfucker 2 times said, oh, your room 101 cigar 2 times. 2 times.
Yeah, and that's my fault. Again, that comes from thinking back to the very first part of the show with the hit and run.
I don't really care. I'm just fucking with you.
So if you were to, what are some of the manufacturers, and if you don't want to answer this question, it's fine, that you smoke besides your own on a regular rotation?
I like Davidoff. I like very much. Herrera Esteli, the first one, called maybe just Herrera Esteli. Some of the Crown Set shit, I think, and then the Lucione also. Like, I like like if I made Nicaraguan cigars, I feel like they're very much my profile of Nicaraguan cigar maker. I definitely would not smoke this shit here.
If there is there a rapper that is your favorite? Now you can give me musician if you want, but I'm mainly talking about cigar rapper that is your favorite. And I remember you saying Habano, but is that your all-time favorite?
Habano. And I mean, leaf, it grows a lot of places. It tastes different everywhere. You have different farms. You have the same farm growing the same tobacco. It tastes different on 2 different sides. If you want, you can get a full body Habano. You can get a mild Habano. It's to me tobacco, and to me, like, I just fucking love it. Anastasia, jewel brand, will only ever exist in Habano wrapper. I actually looked at pro version of it, which I have an amazing blend, but then I refused to put it under the Anastasia name. You have to be pure, and you have to keep that as Habano, because to me that's the perfect wrapper. Ecuador's got the best tasting Habano wrapper.
Now, is there a rapper that you wish you could work with but haven't yet?
No.
So there's no like obscure tobaccos like African or Middle Eastern that you've ever been like, I'd love to find a way to work with those.
No, because I think everything we have in one way or the other. And if we haven't, then through the crafted and curated, because we have weird shit coming through crafted and curated. That some of that's.
Well, and then let's see here. If there was one celebrity that you can choose to showcase your cigars and be like, I would love for them to smoke my cigars. And for instance, foundations with Joe Rogan. If there was somebody in that Hollywood world where you would like, I would love to have you smoke my cigars. Is there a name that you can think of?
I know matches Vanilla Ice. Back. I don't fucking know. I have no idea. Pat.
When you're done and gone off the planet, how do you want the cigar world to remember Robert Caldwell?
I'll just be a blip in the radar.
Oh. What was that?
I'll be a blip in the radar that they don't remember.
I doubt that very highly. Doubt that
I
very
would like
highly.
them to only remember Anastasia.
Okay, so that is your crowning achievement in the cigar world.
Yeah, to me, our legacy will be that brand.
Okay, okay. Is there um is there a country that you, well, I guess we kind of touched on that with rapper. So, well, if there is something that you would be willing to kind of talk about that's maybe a little under the wraps, but not so much that you can't discuss, that people can expect this fall from you that maybe wasn't shown at PCA.
Well, it was kind of shown because we had one box there, but long live the Queen. We have,
Ooh, long live the Queen.
yeah.
Ooh.
And that's all I'm telling you because I'm used to cigar aficionado, and I haven't told anybody any information, but that's coming 10 count in November, maybe October if I'm lucky. But long live the Queen. Like we did Escape Plan, which is a box press King is dead. We're doing Escape Plan, a box press Long Live the King that's coming sometime in the fall as well. The Long Live the King is going to be with it, and then
awesome.
Gone. Yeah, but then the crazy brand, it's amazing. The packaging's really cool.
That is something that I will be looking forward. And Sean was watching from my home humidor, where I go to my home lounge. Sean, if you're watching, please get that cigar in. I'm very interested and would probably end up buying a shit ton.
Sean, they get 22 minutes to midnight in also. That's a fucking of a cigar.
22 minutes to midnight. Awesome. Well, you know, like I told you in the background, I'm a big fan of your cigars. I smoke as many as I could find, through including all your lost and founds and anything new that you have coming out. So I have 22 minutes to midnight, just the tip. The Queen is Dead on my humidor, as well as the new size release for the Last Czar, which I'm also going to be looking forward to as well. So, well, Robert, thank you so much for coming on, man. I tell you, this was absolutely fantastic. I love how open and uncensored you are inside the cigar world. So I truly appreciate from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much for coming on, and you're always welcome to come back on as often or as frequently as you so choose. So, everybody watching the show, thank you so very, very much for watching. We had a huge viewership tonight, and we yes, Ryan is one of the biggest fans of all the Caldwell Room 101 cigars, which I am a big fan of both entirely. But thank you, Kevin, for pointing out my mishap in the beginning of the show and later on. What was that?
Matt Booth's to sell out. Fuck Matt Booth.
I will let you take that off air with Matt Booth. But thank you, everybody, for watching. And until we see you again, hang around for a quick second, Robert. Thank you very much for watching. Sure, until we see you again, smoke what you like, smoke as often as you can, and have an absolute great rest of your week.